I am inferior by birth, and it's just, it reflects badly, and you can use anything as a means of reason. In this case, they use religion and Christianity, and Christians know that's not what Christianity represents, but you can just put a label on it and say, oh, this is why, and it doesn't have to make sense as long as you enforce it, and that's the way people are raised.
And they're so far from Rome, and just like they're past the wall too. So I mean, he's the king basically. I mean, he can do whatever he wants.
Well, you know, his son basically has an influence from his father all throughout his life, and then Arthur's the first one to actually start challenging his authority and sort of like test him in a way to show that he, you know, that his way is not the correct way. I mean, there's sort of, you know, different ways for him to communicate. But definitely, I mean, the idea that he is God seems like, you know,
a bit much, because he's not saying that exactly, but the way he's representing himself and the way he's teaching Christianity and to them, it's making it seem like, oh, well, I am a figure of God, so you have to do whatever I say with no prior background. And like you were saying about the son, that's the only way he's been raised. And when Arthur came in and his knights, and they completely changed his world, do you think that at the end when he goes back to Rome, do you think he's going to take the values Arthur gave him, or do you think he's going to go back to what his father taught him?
Well, I mean, I saw another part of the movie later on. Arthur and the son sort of have a conversation sort of about basically Arthur saying that all men are free and equal.
Right before they kill his
right.
father,
Yeah, right before that happened. But the son was like still a little influenced by the father and said that basically all of his teachings of his father were more correct than Arthur.
Well, I mean, it's kind of hard to change your ideals in like the span of.
I mean, throughout his whole life, his father's been his only influence.
Yeah, and he knows of the punishments in Rome. Like Arthur's mentor, the one that he looked up to and thought that he taught the ideals of Rome, he found out from the little boy that he was excommunicated and killed because of his ideals. So do you think that's going to influence how the son's going to go? Because even if he believes in what Arthur's saying, he can't communicate and preach these ideas for fear of being murdered. You know,
but he's also being groomed to be deposed. So if he does get to that point, he'll probably.
If he's in a position of power, he may be able to change things. But I think that before then, he'll probably have to lay low. But then again, when does it come to what you believe in and what's right to do versus how you can help other people and how society works?
This kind of leads into question 3, which basically says, does the author seem to favor any certain groups, and how are rich and poor depicted? And I think we covered that pretty well. Like the rich have all the power, and they're depicted as gods to a relation, but they're also opposed by King Arthur and his knights in a way that they never have before, and it's kind of an enlightening vision to the people and his son, which is.
And I think, like you were saying, that there's a difference between the rich and the poor, but it's not just that, it's also blood relations, because you're born into your society. And do you think it's possible for a person who's born a poor farmer and a serf to end up becoming in a position of power?
Like it's a caste system in a way. Right?
Do you think that it would ever be possible, or is it just because the society is like that way that you'll never be able to get out of that vicious cycle of being poor and being a serf and always following others? Or do you think that Rome offered any opportunities to be able to?
I took Latin over the summer and stuff, and I learned a lot of that stuff. Yeah, I believe in Rome there's always a chance for you to move up in the caste system, but really most people stayed in the lower castes for most of their life. I know that some soldiers were able to become politicians, of course, because they've had the influence and stuff, and once they come home from war, they can't really do anything else. Because when they retire, they become senators and leaders of Rome. But for the average person, it's really hard for them to even move up.
There's only so much you can do with what you're given.
Well, what would you guys do if you were, what would you do if you were in a position that you were born as a serf and you knew that you were going to live in this vicious cycle of being abused and forced to do things you don't want to do? Would you continue to stay with Rome, or would you go like the English natives did and try to rebel against it, even though it may cost your life?
You'd probably go against and rebel. I mean, you saw that Arthur was in a higher position than his men, like Sir Lancelot was taken for the 15 they said at the end of the 15 years that they would live in wealth amongst the Romans. So in that way, in a sense, they have moved up in society. So they're no longer peasants, they're no longer farmers. They are now like citizens of Rome.
I mean, the real way to, in that form of society, which is kind of similar to the society we have now, the only real way to move up in that form of society without a revolution of sorts, or any kind of like violence, like what we consider murder, like not in battle, like you kill your friend, would be really to conform.
Yeah,
The
because
only-
they had to give up 15 years to get to that spot.
They did it, I guess you could say willingly. They didn't really, there was no signs of aggression or rebellion in that time, but when,
They didn't have a choice.
well, they did not, of course, but when they finally came to the 15 years and they thought they would have left, and they were left with the last mission, and they were forced to do what they had to do,
Impossible.
the impossible, which they achieved. It truly showed the true side of Rome and not really caring for others, the lesser, the serfs and everybody.
But this also, going back to what you said, that they still came back even though they were free, do you think that they did that more out of habit because they're used to being together? Do you think that they were afraid of going back to Rome now that they knew these ideals and how Rome really worked? Or do you think that they really did it out of because it was the goodness of their heart and they believed it was the right thing to
Arthur
do?
did it, one, because he was a Christian and he was in the goodness of his heart. And when he was told the news that they had to go back, and he had to tell his men also refused to do it. But because of them being grown up together for 15 years, they knew that they couldn't just leave him and let him do it by himself. They knew that they had to go with him,
Yeah.
even though it was against all odds.
But that's what I'm saying. Do you think, not talking about Arthur, talking about the knights, do you think that they went back because of Arthur to help Arthur, or do you
Yes.
think they went back because they believed in Arthur's cause and they?
I mean, for
Or a
the,
little
the
bit.
main
It
part,
would be hard to live without him in
It was because he was the leader
Yeah.
of the pact, as you can tell, and they knew that even though they were pagan, even though they didn't believe in what he believed, they knew that he was a good man, and they could not just abandon him.
So they just trusted
They
his.
trusted him, and they risked their lives for him.
And honestly, he was their only connection to like power in Rome. Like he was going to become a senator or something, and you know they could live in Rome, but they would be lower class.
It would never be the same.
Yeah, it
without
would never
Arthur.
be the same without him.
With Arthur, they got to places that I don't know. He was that like golden key, that golden gate.
Isn't Arthur like multicultural or something like that? Like he comes from.
Yeah,
I think he's from.
his mom was Woad and his dad was English, or Roman.
Then in that case, wouldn't like obviously the Romans are gonna trust Arthur more.
That's why in the end
So-
he was able to talk to Merlin and get him on the same side and actually win against the Saxons.
In that case, like if he's multicultural, then wouldn't that mean he's gonna also have to trust him more because like he's not full Roman. He has sort of no ties to. He has ties to both sides. So
more so than they would just like any like Roman Christian.
yeah,
Yeah.
Like, I feel like if Arthur was just straight up like a Roman, they wouldn't completely trust him. Like they might like his ideals, but they know that in his heart he's still 100% Roman.
But his knights weren't. He wasn't. Woad isn't the same race as
He's
the knights.
saying basically if Arthur was full Roman, and correct me if I'm wrong, if Arthur was raised in Rome and in like a higher class and everything, and he were to lead these men, the men would not have the same connection because they knew that Arthur was doing it for the Pope, for the city of Rome.
Yeah.
There'd be no
Instead
brotherhood.
of the brotherhood. It would not be exactly a brotherhood, it would be more of a loyalty to Rome and do it in the name of Rome, not in the name of.
He's not doing it for people.
Right,
He
but
also-
doesn't he find out that his mom isn't Roman? Isn't Roman later in the movie where he pulls the sword out of the grave and he's in
Yes.
a dark spot in the
Yes.
forest?
But that's also what caused him to, because at the beginning, the reason you were saying that Rome trusts him is because he's half Roman and everything, but also Rome was wary at first because his mom was Woad, but after, when his mom was killed, he believed that Merlin had killed his mom, so that cut off most of his ties from the Woads, and I think that's a reason why Rome really trusted him, but because he still had those ties with his mom and Woads, in the end, he could go back, and like at the very end, when he marries Guinevere,
Yeah.
they say at the wedding, and now our cultures have one, like we're tied together and everything, but do you think that he is an accurate representation of a type, because he no longer represents Rome since he
Well,
left?
what I was trying to say earlier was that I don't think he realized that he was half, his mom was a woad until Merlin told him after he had gone into the mission and he was in a forest without his men.
But I guess that comes back to the point. Does it really matter where he came from? Because everyone there, it was all about what you're born into, if you're born rich, if you're born poor. But the whole ideals of what the Wodes were standing for is that you should be free by right to make your own choices, and your background and where you come from shouldn't matter, and you should be able to lead any life. And doesn't that kind of relate back to what the whole American dream is, that you should be able to start from anywhere, any level of being rich, being poor, and be what you want to be just by effort and putting your heart into it.
Yeah, but I'm focusing more on like what the knights trusted him more.
Okay, because he was, yeah. And
Because if they didn't know that he was part woad, it wouldn't have mattered as much. It wouldn't have been such an influence.
But also the way that he treated them. If he had been raised in Rome, I'm sure his ideals would have been completely different. He wouldn't have had his mentor that really changed him and sculpted him as a person. He would have probably had more Roman ideals and believed just as the owner of the land, what was his name again? Marius.
Yeah.
What he had believed, because he would have been taught, oh, it's through Christianity, so he would have thought, oh, I'm doing the right thing because it's Christianity, so I have this right. But in reality, it's not that way, so I don't think it would have been the same, like I think you were saying earlier.
Who's the man that died? The one that, it was Arthur's mentor. He had died later.
No, his name starts with a P. The
Mm.
one who
So-
they found that the
Yeah.
son had told had been
That
fixed.
mainly going back to what you were saying, even though he was like part Roman, he did not go by the ideals of the Romans. He thought he heavily believed in free thinking, in being free by birth, not being constrained to just like the Roman stereotype, not just conforming to just what the Pope says, but more of not trying to really put it in words.
But I see what you mean, but also he thought those were the Roman ideals. When he was growing up, his mentor was Roman. He always believed that what his mentor was teaching him.
He was not like
But he didn't know that his mentor was different. And that's why at the very end, when he finds out that Rome isn't, and he finds out that Rome isn't the ideals he's been taught. Because the whole time when he wanted to go to Rome and save Rome, he had believed that Rome was the ideals that he was taught as a child by his mentor. And it wasn't until the end when he finds out that Rome is no longer that way. So the whole time he thought he was going by the ideals of Rome, but in reality he was going by his own ideals and just right and wrong.
You said that Arthur might not like represent what Rome stands for. You ever think that maybe he stands for what old Rome stood for? Like, isn't like he
Yeah, they mentioned
was
that.
put into like like the new Rome is, you know, I'm not sure if the religion changed or anything like that, because Rome obviously did change religions, you know, after the crucifixion. And you know, before then Rome was the place to be because it was a place of order, but you could also rise. The thing is though, is like if he's told all these stories and everything like that, he's trying to represent only. He's not trying to represent Europe, which is probably why he didn't have a whole lot of sympathy for like who's the guy that was in, I can't remember his name. Which is why I think the Britain's somewhat respected because he's trying to say everyone should be equal, but at the same time, you know, they don't like Rome, the new Rome, but they might like his company just because he's trying to represent what an old Rome used to be. Same with his teacher who tried to make show what an old Rome used to be, but at the same time he can't control what everybody else does. He can't control the corruption. All he can do is try to correct it when he sees it.
But this leads to another question, is that Rome obviously had previously standed for great ideals, just as the woes were trying to start in England. Do you think that it's impossible for society to continue with great ideals, or is it inevitable that in the end corruption will come and a new time has to start? Or do you think that it's possible for a society to continue on the ideals that it was built on and forever be a good society?
It'll forever be a cycle. Like, back and forth. Like, and this gets number 2 on this topic. And number 2 is, does